Afternoon, this is I believe, the last presentation between us and the end, right? Yeah. So hopefully we'll get you out with lots of great information to take home. Research vessels present unique challenges that are specific to their maritime environment. During this presentation, we'll explore some of those challenges faced by the ships of the U.S. academic research fleet, as well as some solutions done through collaboration between fleet members and others, such as the OmniSOC. I'm Mikeal Simpson. I'm a senior security analyst with OmniSOC and Trusted CI, and the Chief Information Security Officer for the U.S. Academic Research Fleet. I have the honor to, what's that? Next slide. Yeah. I have the honor, there we go, to present my colleagues on this panel. Chris Romsos is the Data Presence Systems Engineer for the Regional Class Research Vessel Project, commonly referred to as RCRV, at Oregon State University, where he contributed to the scientific design and specification for the ships of the under construction in the RCRV, and now works with the vessel transition team. Julian is the IT manager for the research vessel Sekuliak. The research vessel is owned by the NSF and operated by the University of Alaska. And finally, Mikeal Jones is a security analyst at OmniSOC and Trusted CI, and is a member of the cybersecurity team for the academic research fleet, leading the compliance documentation service. For this panel, each of the panelists has a short presentation on some of the challenges and solutions that we experience in the academic research fleet. And then at any time, feel free to raise your hand. We'll get a mic to you, and you can ask questions. So I'd like to welcome Chris up to the podium to open us.
Thank you, Mike. All right, thank you very much, Mike. Yeah, I neglected to figure out how to advance this. It's just this one?
Baseball. There we go.
For some weird reason, I thought somebody was going to do it for me. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so the topics that we'd like to cover today, just a little list of what I'm going to cover. The unique and not so unique challenges. I'm going to talk a little bit about that and a little bit about collaboration, and then I'll hand it off to Julian. So I think that we have all of the same IT challenges that terrestrial, people that work in terrestrial data centers and academic institutions have, right? We want to maintain our security without sacrificing our usability. I think that's probably, one of our toughest challenges, to be honest with you. I've underlined a couple of the ones that resonated with me. I mentioned yesterday that we do have trouble acquiring and retaining the right staff on the vessel. We staff our vessels with what we call marine technicians, but they wear a lot of hats, and one of those hats, or one of the responsibilities, the scope of responsibilities that they have is to keep everybody safe and alive, and that includes cyber safe. System uptime has been a unique challenge. They're complicated systems, low bandwidth, only a few people staffing the boat, maybe one person on at any given time, covering the IT. But the unique challenges, kind of drilling into this, I already mentioned WAN performance. I think the one challenge that I didn't put on this slide was our parent institutions, where we work, really, even though we may have been ship operators for 50 years or more, our IT departments really don't understand vessel operations very well. The schedule, the pace, the limitations, we work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's a ship out there, and the university shops are more 9 to 5. Everything, purchasing, I mean, it's a different world than they're used to supporting, just summarize it like that. Vessel costs, the daily operation costs, I just looked this up, our projected costs to operate the RCRV around $30,000 a day. So it's like, that's close to $6 million a year to operate one vessel. It's fun. This next one is kind of fun. Saltwater and electronics don't really mix, obviously. But there's a lot of unique conditions on the vessel, vibration, there's a lot of motion on the vessel, some of it rather, not violent, but intense. It's not just rolling back and forth, but you could be pounding into heavy seas. So things need to be secured, mounted resiliently. So it's a slightly different look to our data centers than terrestrial data centers. We also work all over the world. Some of our ships leave their home port and might not make it back for 2-3 years. Some of our global class ships will basically take a trip around the world, stopping in all different kind of places. So we have teams that have to mobilize in foreign countries, ship equipment in and out. There's ITAR restrictions, all that good stuff. Coincidentally, there's a lot of geofencing in the satellites. So John Meyer mentioned yesterday that we have Star Shield, which is a government defense flavor of Starlink, but it's still geofenced, just less than the regular Starlink. And the mission scope is really broad. Academic research fleets has a largely comprised of like multi-use vessels, right? There are vessels that are highly specialized, maybe a vessel that's handling the Alvin submersible, for instance. But generally, they're outfitted to do lots of different types of science. So we turn over visiting science teams, at a high pace, and there's no guarantee that the next team is doing anything remotely like what the last team did, so there's a lot of pressure to scale up, bring a bunch of stuff in, tear it down, and do it again. So that can really cause some pains, especially if we need to do equipment maintenance in a foreign port, over 2 days. Right, some of the challenges are how do we bring in people remotely to support that? How do we physically get somebody there to do that? Long lead times on equipment, stuff like that, or some of the unique challenges that we have. So how are we addressing this? UNOLS is a group of operating institutions and other ocean. It's more than just operating institutions, but they manage and schedule the vessels and organizational oversight of this enterprise. So we go to annual trainings, and it's probably one of the best groups that I've been around, in my career, is this RV Tech group, which is a subcommittee of UNOLS, and they hold an annual meeting, but more importantly, they work well together, and it's a very open community, it's a very engaged community. There's a strong bonds between our marine technicians in this community because they rely on each other. There is a very functional and strong support network, kind of grassroots network in that community. We recently formed the Cyber Infrastructure Working Group, largely around a problem of cybersecurity, but I hope that the Cyber Infrastructure Working Group starts tackling some non-security infrastructure problems in the future, but that's the problem that we really have been able to organize around, and that's a great team. And I should also mention there's another group, the Satellite Network Advisory Group. There's these subcommittees that help us. So SatNag will advise us on how to set up our satellite networks more similarly across the fleet. We'll go out and purchase bandwidth for us, provision us with that. So those are some of the community collaborations that we've been able to build. We use all the same tools that everybody's using right now. We're heavily reliant on Slack. There are a number of those groups will stand up wikis, specific to a specific problem. For instance, there's a multi-beam advisory group that maintains a really nice wiki about how to work with that technology. And then we're building with partner institutions.
Just a moment. We need a mic over there.
Oh, yeah. I see people, but not. Thank you.
That's all right.
Sorry about that, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Again, Phil Scenic. I was wondering, and maybe this is something you guys already know and have addressed, and I was just wondering, just from a layman's perspective, are there manufacturers making seaworthy technical equipment? And if not, are these groups that you had alluded to before reaching out to them to see if there's even a possibility to do something like that?
Anybody offer that to?
In terms of IT equipment, generally not. However, a lot of the vessels utilize ruggedized computers like Panasonic Toughbooks or machines that are built for industrial automation. So systems that are, hardened, no moving parts, things like that. So in terms of the IT infrastructure, though, Cisco switches, yeah, they don't make, or at least I have never seen a ruggedized Cisco switch, but I'm sure they exist for special customers. But we tend to just use enterprise-grade equipment and maintain lots of spares.
Yeah, and make sure it's racked securely. The racks have generally have vibration isolation, and the normal HVAC and stuff like that. The new vessels are, I believe, the first vessels to actually build a data center that's not serving any other use, right? So we have a below the main deck data center, 12 racks, 208 power, which was kind of unique, right? Everything was running on 120. And we can, physically secure that room, and we set up a little workspace in there. But most vessels will have a good bit of their computing equipment, scientific computing equipment in the labs, right? So you'll have a computer lab where you can. So we took a little different approach to beef up the physical security in that regard. The last, I think that was the end. Oh, yeah, that was the end of mine. Thank you for that question, and yeah, I will hand it on over to Julian.
Yeah. Well, actually, first, to the panel, there were talked about lots of common IT equipment, networking and servers and so on. We heard earlier in the conference about monitoring of cyber infrastructure. Can you tell us not just about monitoring, but how normal activities that you would monitor, maintain the common IT equipment is complicated because of the environment that you're in?
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely, it's quite complicated. Until recently, we did very little remote monitoring from shore or shipping any monitoring data off the vessel. So you hold on to that and take a look at it, at some later date when you had resource to do that, right? I don't know if you want to add anything.
I guess I would add that maybe a consideration on the vessels that probably isn't as much of consideration for the terrestrial-based facilities is bandwidth and our, heavy monitoring of bandwidth utilization on the vessels, because that tends to be the limiting factor sometimes. When you've got 60 people sharing an internet connection that's akin to, not much better than a old school modem.
Yeah, I don't
so-
know how accurate that number was, but I had roughly 20 megabit is you're doing really well if you can get that.
It's been getting better, thanks to high SeasNet support and getting Starlink on all the vessels. We've started to only recently have real bandwidth, but yeah, in terms of monitoring tools, I'd say that was probably the big one, is making sure that everyone was being fair and using the bandwidth appropriately.
Yeah, and now you're not doing quota management for bandwidth anymore, are we?
Yeah, no, we're with our new next-gen firewalls on many of the vessels. We removed the daily quota. It used to be on vessels you would get X number of megabytes to use per day, and that was all you got. And if you used it up looking at Instagram, too bad. So we've only recently been able to go away from the quota-based system and move towards next-gen firewall, QoS,
Right.
and traffic prioritization, which has been working quite well on several of the vessels.
Yeah, and the reports from the field are that the marine technicians are spending much less time, policing people's use of that shared resource, and I mean that's a big win, right? That goes a long way to building confidence, right? Because we're sitting on the CIWG, I think talking about policy and these firewall, what are we going to do? And I think the success of that is often, if the people that are going to be implementing it and living with it at sea, so those wins are really important.
I'll speak a little bit to the monitoring aspects as well. One initiative that we're slowly working through is kind of opt-in for right now is a FortiGate advanced firewall project. What that does afford us is, sharing that community expertise among operators, giving them a common platform that they're becoming familiar with. And as far as the monitoring aspects go, we've architected a solution in a way where each vessel that has adopted the FortiGate project essentially can send us network traffic back to an East Coast and a West Coast hub. Right now, we've got the East Coast up and running, and soon planning to bring a West Coast hub online. They will act as a redundancy failover, so as we need to service one East Coast or West Coast hub, information flowing, net flow data, and other items that we can monitor will be coming through and being ingested into OmniSOC SIEM. There we have a team of analysts that custom tailor alerting and monitoring solutions for that. We want to make sure that what we see is a high level of confidence before we bother these guys that's already overwhelmed with a lot of work and very little technical staff on ship. So there's a little bit of tuning there. So we'll need to go take that information, make sure that we've run it through. We feel comfortable that it's a high-level, actionable item that they may need to look further into. Sometimes it'll be, hey, look at this, and they're like, oh, that's our campus scanner we forgot to tell you about. And so we, kind of keep a log of that information so we don't continue to pester them with, known good traffic. But here and there, we may find something that will require a little bit more investigation on ship.
And I believe we have a question.
Hi, this is Sam Chan from GMTO. Got a question on research data, right? How you move those data off? Are you doing on the wireless link, or are you just taking the hard drive back off when you're on shore? And the other one is...
Yes.
Yeah. Cisco does make a rugged switch.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, great question. Because, as you know, we're all out there to collect data. That is the product that we deliver at the end of a cruise. In the traditional method, yes, we deliver it on a hard drive, give it to the chief scientist, and say, here you go, there's your data set. We would also take a physical hard drive and mail it to the repository. It's called a rolling deck to repository. They're at LDEO, I think. These days, what we're trialing now, because we have the higher bandwidth on board, is sending that data directly to the repositories utilizing idle bandwidth, satellite bandwidth. And these next-gen firewalls are allowing us to do that. Like, oh, overnight, there's not a lot of people using the link. Let's try and burst up some traffic to the repository. And on the Sikuliak anyway, it's been working quite well so far.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is with this bandwidth that we're now able to utilize, through this increased bandwidth, we can do exactly what Julian's talking about, move the data to the repository, when there's low network utilization, or we can also send certain types of data, right? Time series, observations, vector type data that isn't really giant, right? We can send that home directly, right? So we have ships that are sending their so one thing to remember is the platform of the vessel might take on a team to work on it for a couple weeks to go out to sea, do their thing, but the vessel also functions as a observation platform, like a continuous observation platform. So it has resident equipment that other research programs are depending on the information from. Ground truthing satellites, weather observations, things like that. We're now moving that data off the ship immediately, right? And supporting that with shoreside dashboards and data services. We're trying to build or facilitate use of that data, lowering the time to science, right? Or turning something from data into information that gets fed back to those scientists on board so they can maybe change what they're doing. So we're gonna hear it a lot, but the theme is satellite. The bandwidth is a enabling technology, and this level of bandwidth is transformative.
Thank you. Julian?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That was great. What I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is how cybersecurity impacts vessel safety and security. So when we think about these research vessels, they're essentially these mobile, high-profile, high-value assets, but they traditionally exist outside of the institutional secured network perimeter. So we have to think about where we're operating. We're by ourselves, so we have to make our own little perimeter. Also, that modern research vessels, and all vessels generally, are big interconnected networks. And there's OT systems, there's science systems, there's just general network infrastructure on board. And the control and stability systems are now also computer controlled. I don't know if anybody remembers the older 90s movie Hackers, where they took over oil tankers and they were controlling the ballast systems to sink the oil tankers remotely. That's not outside the realm of possibility, because these systems are, in fact, computer controlled and computers can be compromised. And so that's part of why we take cybersecurity very seriously and air gap all these systems and generally try to not let them talk to the internet. We touched on this a few days ago, the fact that OT systems are generally left unpatched and stagnant for years. We have systems that are designed to run for decades and not be updated. That can be a problem, especially if somebody decides to plug that computer into the internet, which is not a great idea. Another consideration is the fact that we openly share the physical layouts of our vessels. They're all on our websites. You can go on and see the complete physical layout of the vessel. On the Sikuliak, we have a high-resolution 3D tour you can take and walk around the vessel. And so a potential attacker might be like, I've got a blueprint of where to go on the vessel if I want to look for this computer. That might be a problem. Also, unsecured spaces on vessels. A lot of our IT infrastructure, as Chris mentioned, tends to be out in labs, just in open racks. On the newer vessels, we're trying to finally address this problem by building secured data centers in the vessels, but a lot of them don't have that. So we are dealing with potential just physical access to anybody on board the vessel. So one way that we potentially handle that is the physical access to the vessel itself. So MARSEC, Marine Security, if you've ever been on a ship or gone on a ferry, you see a little placard right before you get on the boat that says, we are at MARSEC level 1, generally. And that means that it's sort of, everything's open, people can just come and go.
And then the MARSEC levels increase as threats are made to like if there's a bomb threat or if there's a known problem in the area, you might increase the MARSEC level, which tightly restricts access to the vessel. But generally, what we're in the research vessel community, you're basically considered an authorized person. You're on the ship. We've said, okay, you're allowed to roam free on the vessel. In general, there are spaces that we secure on the boat. But so all these things, it makes a very complicated situation on a research vessel because we can't just say, yep, key card access and you can't get at the servers. Well, it doesn't work when the server's just out there in the middle of a lab space. Some other concerns when you're operating at sea are some crazy ones like GPS spoofing. Like in the Bond movie Tomorrow Never Dies, that was a main plot of the movie. They were going to try and drive a vessel off course to put it into Chinese waters and start a war. And in June 2017, there were some actual instances of GPS spoofing in the Black Sea. So it is a thing that we need to consider, is that a lot of systems rely on GPS systems and things you might not realize. Like your cell phone, the time on your cell phone is generally GPS driven. Signal jamming is a thing we might need to worry about. As I said, these are high value public assets, and so they might become a target for attackers. But not necessarily malicious signal jamming, but also interference. We have a lot of systems generating RF, and so that might cause interference with your onboard infrastructure. On the Sikuliak, we had an instance where a network switch kept going offline, and we couldn't figure it out. Turned out it was if somebody was keying their radio, their VHF radio used for intership comms, too close to that switch, it was cutting it offline. So that was an interesting problem that we eventually solved by moving to fiber. Also, I wrote this one down, electronic charts versus traditional paper charts. So it's 2024, and only just now are several of the vessels in the fleet moving away from paper charts for navigation and moving to electronic charts. And that opens up another potential vulnerability where do you trust the digital charts that were delivered to you? And do you have some mechanism for verifying that this is in fact from a verified source and hasn't been compromised in transit to the vessel, potentially then running the ship aground because you think you're in good, deep water and you're not. So that's kind of just some of the weird funkiness that we all have to deal with operating on research vessels. Chris touched on earlier, and also Mike, that generally when we are operating these research vessels, we have our institutional support, and these institutional IT folks don't necessarily understand some of the challenges we face operating at sea and some of the unique mission requirements. And so as a part of a way to try and address that, what we did is back in April, we hosted on the RV Sikuliak a research vessel cyber cruise, where we brought on people from 7 different institutions with folks that don't traditionally get to sail. So we had, Mike came with us, it was a great opportunity. You'll come on the next one.
I'm coming in December.
So we took this opportunity where we had vessel time. We were transiting from Newport, Oregon back to Seward, Alaska, and we had open space on the vessel. And so we invited all these cyber, folks to come on board. We had a bunch of tabletops. We talked about some of the challenges. We were talking through a lot of stuff. We also used it as an opportunity for hands-on training with our new FortiGate firewall. So we built a little lab. We had, we had a half dozen FortiGate firewalls on tables. And it was a great opportunity for collaboration and to get some folks real experience at sea and to understand, hey, how come I'm not getting a response from so-and-so on the vessel? Well, it's because they're probably seasick in their bunk. It was also a great opportunity for us to do the first of its kind in the academic fleet anyway, a cyber incident drill. So on vessels, we generally do safety drills, man overboard or a person overboard, fire, abandoned ship. These are drilled constantly on vessels because you're out at sea and safety is paramount. We didn't have a procedure for doing a cyber, what happens if this machine is compromised? So we cooked up a drill, Mike's gonna talk about that in a little while, and it was a tremendously successful, really eye-opening on some of the ways we can improve and continue to do these so that we're prepared for that sort of thing. This was the team out on the Sikuliak as we were transiting across the Gulf of Alaska. It was a really, really good time. And I wanted to show this picture because it's something you don't generally think about. Your firewall might fall off the table because the table's moving. So we actually had these with just big clamps holding them down and non-skid matting underneath them.
It was the first time that I've ever needed to bungee cord my laptop onto a table. You know, you're just rocking and rolling throughout the cruise. These little slip mats were super helpful as well.
I do want to point out this is not the production deployment method, just to make sure you know that.
Yeah, this is our lab environment. And actually, it's a good point that Chris made earlier about these vessels being platforms. You know, generally these labs, they start clean and empty. We fill them up with gear during a cruise, and then that all has to get removed again at the end of a cruise. And so it's another challenge that, you know, every, say, 2 to 6 weeks, you're completely rebuilding a lab environment, potentially with lots of weird systems that need network connectivity and figuring out how you're going to make that work. So yeah, let's talk about the drill.
Just wanted to make a quick comment. Julian was speaking about, you know, campus infrastructure and how, you know, they run a 9-to-5 shop. And so if there's an issue on ship, communications in their internal collaboration amongst their tech team, their management, their leadership, and then, you know, kind of some of the struggles from being supported centrally by a university that's, you know, 6,000 miles away, really brings some challenges to their operations. And so them building their own resiliency is very important. In helping to do that, we've been working with several operators to really just take a look at their documentation, their incident response plans, and help them make improvements there. And one way to do that, tabletops, again, as Mike said, things in the maritime industry, they're not exercises, they're drills. So really this was an opportunity for us to perform a tabletop pretty much in real time underway on the ocean. It was a little bit interesting because we had Julian on ship, and sometimes he's not on ship as IT manager. We also had, I think, two technicians and a MAR tech. Typically, that is not the situation. They have maybe one MAR tech on the ship focused on science, and so they're running around with instrumentation and putting out fires left and right for the scientists. So this was a great opportunity for us to kind of work through an issue together. I think it's very important right out the gate. This is not punitive. We're not keeping score. What we want to do is build muscle memory. We want for teams to know where their documentation is, where their plan resides, what that process looks like, so that as they have an incident or a tabletop, then everybody kind of knows how to respond, not react to that particular issue or incident. One thing that we really touched on for a good incident response plan is, you know, we all understand the impact. Compliance really isn't the goal. The goal is that these boats are out doing oceanographic science, that researchers are getting their data, that it's being shared with the world. And that's what these guys do day in and day out. And then from a collaborative standpoint, everyone that I've worked with in the academic research fleet, they are a unique bunch. They are passionate about the science. They're, you know, passionate to support their researchers and their colleagues. So really just, they understand the impact. That boat must go on. Things are going to come up, but how do we deal with them as they occur? Knowing their individual roles on ship, on shore, their constituents that they need to report to in the time of an incident, and really just building that muscle memory. A tabletop's a very low cost, high value way to reinforce best practices
and it's an iterative process. We write things down at a desk somewhere and we say, this is our plan, but when you really get down to it, and hence the importance of a tabletop, that may look great on paper, but is it really a good solution in practice? What steps may we have forgotten about in documentation? So running through these drills allow for us to really hone in on our actual process as we work through these issues. Communication, Julian's team actually did great. I had mentioned Julian was on ship, some techs were on ship, the MarTech was on ship, but they had only given their campus security a heads up of, we're going to run a drill today. You will hear some chatter. We will be reaching out to you, but this is just an exercise. No need to, wake people up in Fairbanks just because of the drill. And so communication is often a challenge, knowing who you must report to, who your stakeholders are, where your expertise lies, and how to communicate out when you have an issue. And to further compound that, they're on a boat in the middle of the ocean with, 4 or 5 different comms back to shore. Depending on where you're at, a particular solution may not get you connected back to the internet. So there's many different challenges there, unlike maybe a research building on a campus where your security team's right across the street. So in this drill, we picked on them with a piece of OT, an engine control room PC. This is a vended system that monitors probably hundreds of pieces of apparatus on ship. One thing that I thought was incredibly valuable here in doing this, Julian's team knew what the baseline looked like for this system. It is not connected to their network. They knew exactly where the network drop was located. They knew that it was disconnected as it should be because there is no vendor on the phone to walk them through any updates or monitoring from that node. So we just kind of taped a ransomware notice on that machine. And really, how does ransomware appear on this? We had to be a little creative with that. And one of the engineers, in this simulation, we said, oh, the engineer's iPhone was, low on battery. There's a USB port on the front of this for servicing. That passes through some power. So that was how we got initial access to that system, and really just allowed Julian's team to work through that process. They did a fantastic job. The engineers followed kind of a chain of command, talked to the MarTech informed the captain. They immediately understood when this occurred that this system, there's a redundancy right next to it. So there was some failover there, some resiliency there. The team understood the baseline capabilities and how to respond. In the event that both of these went out, still, there's manual controls that can be taken advantage of and override. So really, that would just lose some real-time monitoring from these beautiful dashboards that they put together.
Can I just touch on that really quick?
Sure.
When we, one of the engine control computers is offline. Great, no problem. They've got the parallel one right next to it. And I said, okay, guys, what if we need to restore this from backup? And the engineers went, what backups?
Absolutely.
This drill really helped us identify some flaws in our system design and how we can address them.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Many systems are backed up. They know that they're backed up. This was one it's a vended system, kind of the vendor, just like we all have to battle all the time, says, here it is, never touch it, we're not gonna support it, only with our instruction should you make any changes. But this also, again, building on a collaborative solution, this is an opportunity, this is an issue, this is a very important piece of the puzzle for the ship's operations. So really, this pointed something out that we can have dialogue with the vendor and say, this is a very important piece of the puzzle for us. we would like to at least be able to respond in a more efficient manner rather than possibly waiting 6 weeks until we're back in port somewhere and you dispatched a technician to join us. Is there anything that we can do? We understand that you prefer that nobody touch this, but can we image it once a month? Or, really just become more self-sufficient on ship. And I'd be interested in hearing someday how that conversation goes with this particular vendor. Yeah, expensive is always the answer. Yeah, absolutely. So we went through this exercise, and really, I think we spent about an hour going through the exercise. And immediately afterwards, we all met up, all of us that joined the cruise. I think we also had the captain join us as well, the marine technicians and the crew of us that went out to collaborate together. And immediately after an exercise, really, we want to distill down what happened. The CMU folks that were here earlier, that you heard earlier this morning, they're spot on. Never let a good scenario, a good exercise, or an incident go to waste. What did we do well is the first thing that we talked about. And Julian and all the observers, we really went through and documented things that the team went well, and also areas that we can make improvements on. Again, this isn't a punitive exercise. We want to exercise our plan, find areas that we can improve, kind of pat ourselves on the back for the things that we did really well, and just improve on that process. So we all met, kind of discussed how that drill went. We took notes, we followed up with Julian in a week or two, and presented them with a formal report, something that he could share with his crew, with his tech team, with his leadership on ship and on shore. Really just to show, here's what we're doing well, here's areas that we can improve, and solicit that buy-in to help them with their process. Again, each time that you run through a tabletop, you want to make it a little bit more challenging. This was, I think, maybe the first drill that's been conducted on a research vessel in ARF. And this is something that we're encouraging other operators to do as well, just to really hone in on their process and documentation.
And I'll add on to that anyone in this room that OmniSoc supports, highly recommend having them run an incident drill for you. It was very informative, and so I think everyone should do it.
All right. Any questions?
Thank you very much. I do have a question. If you had the magic wand, you could do anything, change anything. Scope it down to the discussion, please. What would you do? Julian?
We would have selected a different OT vendor at the initial ship construction.
All right. Yeah. Let's go down to Chris.
I have to violently agree with that. But no, in seriousness, yeah. So our session is about unique challenges. So what would I do different to get rid of a challenge that I have?
Or resources come your way, or what have you?
Yeah. Well, if I think back to my slides and some of those unique challenges, we're seeing like improvement, right? We talked about the high-speed service that Starlink brings, or those low Earth orbit technologies are going to bring. So now, what else can we do, right? So we're moving log files off. We've got people on shore, contracted folks that know what they're doing, looking at those logs. I think we're making great progress there. It's hard. I want to see it go like one more step and leverage those technologies to start like doing ship-to-shore science at like a higher level. I don't know. That's where my brain goes. I know it's not a security thing, but there are new security aspects, right, that's going to bring. So we start having, people run, one of the things that's coming up that we really didn't plan for was, we've been talking about it a lot, AI and people wanting to do, GPU type work on the boat. How are we going to reduce these large data sets, get them to shore where they can be further processed and bring them back? And how do we do that securely? I'm not sure if we're ready for that yet, but it's, that's a problem in front of us.
I have a serious answer. I think it would be staff. I think on the research vessels in particular, one of our main limitations is always berthing space. We can only have so many people on board the vessel, and those spaces are in high demand for science because that's what the vessels are for. I wish that we had the ability to sail IT professional types on these vessels more often. That would be, I think, a way forward.
100%, yeah.
As Chris mentioned, the ability of more bandwidth, that's opening up the door to some of these remote support tools that are available these days. But there's really no substitute for having boots on the ground and support on the vessel.
Absolutely.
I'll also share, across the fleet in general, there's ships that are all various ages. Some have gone through midlife. Chris has some that he's working on that will be coming online here in the next couple of years. But really, there is no commonality across hardware or even ship parts. It's a hodgepodge that everybody's made it work up to this point. And really, so there's not the opportunity to crowdsource unique experiences with particular setups and hardware, just because it is so varying across the fleet. So I think that's a big challenge that the FortiGate project, at least that's bringing in a piece of hardware. They're building expertise across the fleet that allows us some visibility into the ship network and some logs for critical systems that we can monitor to alleviate their team from needing to kind of worry about that. We're taking that off of their plate and kind of alerting them when we have something that they need to take a look at.
Yeah, and I think Chris mentioned earlier this incredible community that we have among the entire ARF, and that's a huge resource that we do leverage. I'm trying to do this. Who solved this problem before? And it's a tremendous resource that we have in our fleet community.
Absolutely. I again, the group that I've worked with throughout the fleet, they are all passionate about the research. They're passionate about the mission. I think Jim Hollick, as he kind of stepped away from his role as project manager from NSF, he was kind of hearkening to the early days of the CIWG, the Cyber Infrastructure Working Group that has been formed in the last several years. And initially that was, I think Jim said there was like 3 or 4 of them that would get together and talk, cyber infrastructure issues and try to architect some solutions. And we have several of those, an ops meeting and a tech team meeting a couple times a month. And we're seeing, 35, sometimes 40 participants in those conversations. So really, there's not a lot of people that do the work that they do. Their campus may not understand their challenges and their mission because, the campus, not many campuses have research vessels. So really, that community that they've built amongst them, while they may have differences of ships and hardware and software, they work on similar things, and so they are able to kind of bridge that gap and leverage what they do know because there's only 16 of them out there.
I'll also add that, sorry, Chris, there's a lot of what we call cross-pollination in the fleet. Marine techs that have worked on one vessel, then go to another vessel and another vessel. And we also encourage lots of shared marine tech. Like we've hosted techs from OSU on the Sikuliaq, from URI, from HUI. It's a really open community. We're very happy to share knowledge and share technicians.
So can I take another stab at if I had my druthers, what would I do?
I'm afraid that the charges on the wish wand are running out, so, but go ahead.
Well, to follow up what these guys are talking about, you heard about staffing and standardization, and we are maturing, right? We are going the right direction. Our IT in the fleet is maturing, but I think I'm not as plugged into the cohort stuff as I need to be, but I'm really interested to see what happens. And I think that we have some ground to cover in terms of like governance and acting, behaving like a more organized unit instead of 16 or 17 individual teams. And that's controversial to say because we have a great track record of innovation and like using that as a strength. And so how we thread the needle and nail it, you know, and not lose that innovation and what makes our community really great. So that's what I would love to see.
Excellent. All right. Yes, excellent.
One last question while you up there singing Kumbaya about the the family shares. Are the research data shareable between all the different research that you have for the vessel, right? That's one. And the other one is when you transition different research onto the ship, do you wipe the data from the previous users?
Generally, there's research data in the domain of the science party. So maybe they brought equipment, they're doing an experiment. Typically, they have a window of time to use that data for their own use, but it must get to the repository, and that's largely their responsibility for their instrumentation and their data. But the underway data that we collect from the resident instrumentation goes directly into the archive and public pipeline for use. And it gets, we have many relationships with, we have customers on shore that are looking for that and using that data as soon as it becomes available, whether it's being trickled home, you know, as we collect it, or whether it's shipped when we get back to port. I don't know if I hit the second part of that question.
Oh, if it gets deleted.
Yeah.
Generally, I mean, this can change vessel to vessel, but generally when a new science party comes on, here's a fresh, you know, empty drive, like network drive for you guys to use, and then at the end of the trip, it's gone. So yeah, it's generally their responsibility to keep their own copy of their data sets that they are generating, but yeah, the instrumentation that's available on the vessel to all science parties, that is, we maintain, on Schooliac, we maintain a year of that data on board the vessel, and then it's in the repository for forever.
Mm-hmm.
Hi there. Sorry. Hi there. First of all, thank you so much for giving your talk. It's amazing to see how many different projects you guys are working on and where you guys are all traveling to. Quick shameless plug, I don't get seasick, so if you're looking for a student volunteer, I'm your guy. But the one question I did have is, you had a slide where you said we're using Google Drive, Slack, things like that. Do you ever find yourself running things locally to preserve bandwidth, and can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, that's what we do. We host our own on-prem solutions for most of that stuff. Well, not Google Drive, but yeah, most ships have a wiki, a web page. Some people are caching Wikipedia. I'm in the middle of a procurement right now for a piece of software, and one of the requirements is, you know, that it has this offline capability and, you know, server on the boat, and we're really pushing it. We're really questioning whether that's really a requirement anymore. So, yeah, I think where we are today, we might not need to do that anymore.
I would just add that, yeah, in general, systems that go on the research vessels, a design requirement is that it must work if there's no internet. That is kind of like a baseline. As Chris said, we're getting to the point now where we can stop always insisting that that's the case. But yeah, we maintain our like onboard everything, because you can't rely on the internet.
Yeah, nobody wants to be the early adopter of that method either, right? So,
All right. We've
We
got
have we have 5 minutes, so if anyone has a question. Oh,
So I know you guys do a lot of things locally, but we have seen kind of a shift where a lot of vendors are migrating to complete cloud offering. You know, we've even seen that where we were using things locally where they're saying now it's moving to the cloud and can no longer get support for it. Do you guys find that as an issue, or are there still plenty of software available where you guys can actually use it locally?
I'll talk to that. On the Sikuliak, we have a really nice 3D printer, and the 3D printer interface is all cloud-based. So you want to send a print job to our 3D printer, you actually are sending it to their cloud, which is sending it back to the 3D printer. And a lot of people like to use Autodesk's free CAD program, Fusion 360, and that is a full cloud solution. And it can be frustrating when it's like, oh, I want to open this software up, okay, and now it's got to download a gig of data. You know, go have lunch and come back. It might work. Definitely seeing a lot of the cloud first solutions, and it's still frustrating on board. Even with this, we have Starlink, and oh wow, suddenly we've got 100 megabit connection. You're still sharing it among 60 people. And if this scientist over here is downloading a huge data set, maybe your cloud operation thing isn't going to work. So.
and there's that data cap. So you.
Oh, our 5 terabytes a
yeah.
month. Yeah, yeah.
the other thing we're running into that is kind of like parallel to that is the licensing model of like the subscription versus the perpetual. And I have a lot of, not on the ship, but I have a field office at the shipyard and a lot of staff down there, and I have difficulty with keeping their systems licensed, making sure they're on the VPN once in a while to, get a refresh token or whatever they need. And I'm imagining you're seeing that on the ships too, right? Where you can't be connected to get licensing or something.
Yeah. No, that's a problem. System that needs to check in every 30 days or whatever. And if you've missed that window, it's problematic.
All right. Are there any more questions? Great. Well, thank you very much for having us. Thank you to our panelists, the most excellent answers. And until next year.